This happened a few years ago, back when I was still working as a scrap collector in a small town in the countryside. During the day, my job was at the junkyard, where I helped sort, weigh, and organize everything that came in. Iron, aluminum, old wires, broken appliances, car parts, anything that could still be turned into cash. The work was heavy, dirty, and exhausting, but it followed a routine that, in a way, comforted me. I knew exactly what I had to do. I knew the rhythm of the place, the schedules, the colleagues, the roar of the machines, and the pungent smell of old metal mixed with dust and burnt oil. But it was at night that the truly grueling part of the job began. The townspeople who wanted to get rid of scrap would notify me during the day and leave everything outside their houses for me to pick up. I drove an old combi, one of those vans that seemed to survive on sheer stubbornness, and made my rounds through the empty streets while the town slept. I always liked the tranquility of the early hours. There was something almost soothing about the deserted roads, the sound of the engine echoing between the houses, and the thud of bags being tossed into the back. At night, everything felt simpler. Fewer people, less talk, fewer problems. Usually I had a helper, but that week he had caught a nasty flu and stayed home. So there I was, alone, doing everything by myself. It was more work, sure, but it also meant more time to think, and perhaps that was exactly what made everything worse. It was during this time that I started receiving requests from an old street in town. I didn't usually pass through there often. It was a forgotten street, almost as if it had been frozen in time. The houses were ancient, many with peeling plaster, dusty windows, and rusted gates. Some looked like they had been abandoned for years. There was an air of decay in that place that didn't fit with the rest of the town. Still, work was work, so I accepted the requests without question. If someone had scrap to be collected, I went to get it. On the first night I went there, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The place was gloomy, yes, but within the limits of what I expected from an old, poorly lit street. What caught my attention wasn't the houses themselves, but the trash bags that appeared consistently alongside the scrap I was supposed to collect. They were larger, heavier, and almost always appeared at the same spot, as if someone knew exactly when I would pass by and left them there on purpose. At first I thought they were just common refuse, old clothes, papers, worthless junk, but that impression changed quickly. One night, driven by curiosity, I decided to open one of those bags. What I found left me unsettled. Inside were antique dolls, clothes that looked like they belonged to another era, and black and white photographs yellowed by time. It wasn't common trash. It looked more like a memory box, or the remnants of an entire life discarded in a hurry. I stared at it for a long time, confused. Why would someone throw away such personal items? Who had kept those things for so many years, and why leave them on that specific street, always next to the scrap I collected? I closed the bag and put everything in the back of the van, but the image of those objects stayed in my mind. As the days went by, the items inside the bags became even stranger. Sometimes old letters appeared, their handwriting faded. Other nights, there were small wooden toys, family portraits, rusted medals, and clothes folded with care, as if they had once belonged to someone very important. I had the sensation that I was accidentally crossing an invisible border between trash and someone's memory. I began to pay more attention to the street. The houses really did seem empty, or at least abandoned. There were broken windows, gardens overgrown with weeds, and cracked walls. On some facades, I had the impression of noticing marks of time that seemed like more than simple neglect. They were like scars. I wondered who lived there, if anyone still inhabited those houses, or if they were just sets left to rot over the years. With every new collection, the feeling that something was wrong only grew. I knew I should just do my job and leave, without meddling in things that weren't my business. But curiosity slowly turned into fear, and fear, when it finds no answers, becomes an obsession. One night in particular, my curiosity finally won. After loading the usual scrap into the combi, I saw another one of those large bags, heavier than normal, leaning against the sidewalk. I looked around before approaching. The street was deserted. No lights on, no movement, no sound. other than the wind passing faintly through the dry trees and the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere. I opened the bag carefully. This time I found a book. It was old, with a worn cover and yellowed pages as if it had been kept hidden for decades. But what made my blood run cold was what was written on the cover. My name. Not just my name, but written in large faded letters, followed by a date. The date was for the following day. I stood there for a few seconds, unable to breathe properly. My entire body seemed to lock up. My heart beat so hard I felt like I could hear it inside my head. It made no sense. How could that book be there? Who would know my name? Why did the date correspond exactly to the following night? I closed the bag in a hurry, shoved the book back inside, and ran to the combi with trembling hands. I didn't know what to think. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew one thing. Something very wrong was happening on that street, and somehow it seemed linked to me. The next day, I went to work at the junkyard as usual, but I was completely out of it. I couldn't stop thinking about the book with my name, nor the date, nor the strange certainty that I had found something that shouldn't exist. Every noise in the warehouse made me jump. Every shadow between the piles of scrap looked suspicious. My colleagues noticed I wasn't well and asked if I was sick, but I couldn't explain the reason for my distress. Who would believe a story like that? I just said I was tired, that working alone was wearing me down more than usual. In reality, I was terrified. When night fell, the tension worsened. I knew I had to go back to that street to finish my rounds, and the thought of finding the bag again, the book, or anything else like it made my hands sweat. The combi, which had always been just a work companion, now felt like a coffin on wheels, taking me straight toward something horrible. When I reached the ancient street, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The place seemed even darker than before. The houses, with their crooked gates and blind windows, had a hostile air, almost as if they were watching my arrival. I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, just my imagination. But the truth was, I was too alone to feel safe. I stepped out of the combi and began loading the scrap that was waiting for me. I tried to act normally, quickly, decisively, without wasting time. But then I heard a low sound, a whisper. It sounded like someone calling my name. I stopped immediately. I looked around. I didn't see anyone. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, even though the street was completely deserted. I felt my heart race. The air seemed to grow heavier. My throat went dry. I decided to finish the job as fast as possible and get out of there. I threw the last piece of scrap into the back and turned to get into the combi. But that's when I noticed something strange. The vehicle's door, which I was certain I had closed, was ajar. Panic seized me in an instant. I gripped the door with a shaking hand and looked inside. There it was. The same book from the night before. Left on the passenger seat, open to the page marked with that night's date. But that wasn't what scared me most. Underneath the book was an old black and white photograph. It showed a man standing next to a combi, a man who looked, in a disturbing way, exactly like me. I lost my breath. I picked up the photo carefully, as if it might crumble between my fingers. Turning it over, I saw a handwritten sentence on the back. I dropped the photo and the book on the seat, slammed the door shut, and drove out of there as fast as I could. I navigated the combi back home in a state of pure automation, without looking back, without wanting to know if anyone was following me, without the courage to face the street I had left behind. That night, I knew I would never be the same. The next day, I went straight to the owner of the junkyard and asked to be transferred to another route. I said I was having health problems, that the night work wasn't doing me any good. I didn't say a word about the book, the photo, or the street. Who would believe me? And even if they did, maybe it would only cause me more trouble. I spent days trying to erase those images from my head. The book with my name, the photograph, the whisper, the feeling that something was watching me from a place I couldn't see. I never went back to that street. I avoided that part of town entirely. Whenever someone mentioned the place, I changed the subject. Pretending nothing had happened was the only way to keep living. Years have passed. The memory of that night still haunts me, but what scares me most is that every once in a while, On very quiet nights, I still hear that whisper, low, distant, as if someone were still trying to call me back. But I'm never going back.